Okay, good morning, everyone. My name's Craig Thompson. I'm the Channel Marketing Manager at Wavelink, and welcome to the second of our InfoByte series for Fortinet resellers and part two of our Fortinet Teleworker seminars. These bite-sized sessions are designed to give our community a deeper understanding of the products we showcase and highlight the key solutions we think businesses need moving forward as we steer ourselves to a new normal. Today's session, hosted by our Fortinet pre-sales lead and resident Fortinet guru, Jaden Zorlo, we will be discussing a staple in data security, multi-factor authentication. It is clear that as we are all working remotely, we need to not only ensure that we can access data when we need it, but to also ensure that data is kept safe and secure at all times. This is a session where we strongly encourage engagement, so please ask any questions you have in the chat box throughout today's event, and Jaden will answer them in a Q&A at the end of the presentation. While we encourage engagement via the chat box, we do ask you to mute yourself if you haven't already done so. We will also be recording the session, and we'll share a link to the event after for you to circulate with your teams. But we also encourage you to provide any feedback you have on the session via a feedback form that will be sent tomorrow with the post-event email. For more information on our other events coming up, I welcome you to use the link in our chat box. And with that being said, Jaden, it's over to you. Enjoy the session. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Are you there?
Yeah, I am. Thank you everyone for attending the second session. We have a very short amount of time this time, so I'm going to move pretty quick through the content. I really apologize if I am going too quick, but use the feedback form or put in the chat box. If you want a follow-up session, Wavelink's always here for pre-sales help. So by all means, you can just basically say, you know what, I like this content, and we can follow you up with a more personalized content for you. So let's get started. Multi-factor authentication with FortiToken and FortiAuthenticator. So you'll see these acronyms come up a lot on the Fortinet data sheets and probably on competitor data sheets as well. So Oath OTP, TOTP, and HOTP. So essentially, OTP is a one-time password. Most people here will be familiar with that. It's essentially the code that's on your keychain or on your app. It's normally a 6-digit number that you type in, and this is called multi-factor authentication. It used to be also referred to as 2FA or two-factor authentication, but what they've actually said now under Oath, which is open authentication compliance, it's that, you know what, don't just have one other one-time password or a different way to authenticate. Have as many as you want, because the more you've got, the more secure it is. So that's why they talk more about MFA. So I'll be saying MFA a lot through this, and that means multi-factor authentication, which is what most people are familiar with as 2FA. So, there we go. So when we're using a multi-factor authentication with a token, as you can see, you'll put in your static password for, say, Active Directory, and then you'll use the token to basically put in your 6 digits there. That then goes to a validation server. In this instance, we'll use a Authenticator that's there. That actual validation server will check with a time sync server, and then it'll check with where your static password is supposed to match, for instance, Active Directory. Then from there, it will send back the algorithm, which will be the time sync through speed and time, and then also match the static password. If it does match, it'll then let you through, and it will be valid authentication. So for best practice security, multi-factor authentication by the Australian Signals Directorate is said it's one of the most effective controls. And like I said, that's different from two-factor, because multi-factor authentication could mean 3-factor, 4-factor, as many factors as you can put in terms of additional challenges and additional challenge responses you have for your particular password, okay? So static password, that would be a single authentication. Static password with a time sync check, well, that's also a second one, that's 2FA. And then you might even have something on top, like as matching a phone call. So picking up a phone call and saying, yes, this is me. That would be a third factor from there. So that's why we say MFA. So the way that the Australian Signals Directorate says that you should have your minimum for your password protection is you should have something you know. So that's a PIN or your actual static password, or maybe a challenge question response, such as, what's your mother's maiden name? Then something you have, so a physical token, so a smart card, or as we were just showing before, a one-time password generator, perhaps a certificate on a dongle. and then something you are. So something that Fortinet's moving towards and something you can get already is biometrics as part of your, say, HP laptop. You've got a fingerprint scanner, or maybe you've got Windows Hello, which is your camera picking up your face. So that's a biometric type of factor, and that would basically make a really good 3-factor combination there. So having your static password, which matches at least the minimums for password strength, then your token, which means you can put a time match sync on a token code, and then perhaps using Windows Hello or a fingerprint scanner as a biometrics. That's a 3-factor authentication method, and it's very, very strong. I just want to say here and point out on the bottom there, the note which says that as soon as you can tick remember password, or as soon as you can use a piece of software like LastPass, which remembers all your passwords for you and links everything back to a single password, well, all of a sudden, that's not multi-factor anymore. You've gone back to a single factor password authentication. So all that effort that your company that has put into purchasing multi-factor and all the R&D that's gone into things like Windows Hello, you've in one swoop just removed it all by using Remember Me or Don't Ask Again on this device button. Okay, so that's, just keep that in mind. That's what the Australian Signals Directorate points out with that. Okay, so what's the current landscape that your clients are potentially using for password management? Well, the first thing is they're probably using nothing. Okay, they don't have a password policy, so you might be able to use password 123, and none of the systems you log into are going to pull you up on that saying, look, your password strength is too weak. They might leave their default admin credentials on a lot of their equipment, so admin or admin blank. That's probably on their router most likely. Or maybe they just have too many passwords. So what's happened is that what their staff have done is they've gone, you know what, I have to remember 50 million passwords and update it every 30 days. I have to give, all these different information to all the different systems, and I get lost on it all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep all my passwords on a notepad on the desktop saying passwords, okay? Or maybe they've stuck them all around their desk on Post-it notes, and so it's very easy to access their passwords because it's made it a bit too hard for them to manage the passwords. So some companies or some staff, what they've done is they've used items like LastPass, and LastPass means that they can control all their passwords in a single place. But as we discussed in the previous slide, all that means is that if their master password gets out, well, then the hacker or also as well the other staff member or maybe an ex-employee, okay, that's another person who's a risk as well. Maybe that person then will put the password in and then still have access to every other system and password as a result, because they only need to find out one password. The other thing I want to point out as well with LastPass is that it is expensive, and a lot of these password systems, they do have a price attached to them if you want the enterprise version, not just the free version. Finally, we've got authenticator apps for tokens. So if you don't have a token yourself, your end client doesn't use a token. Some of their staff may use Google or Microsoft authenticators with their Office 365 or their G Suite. That's all well and good. I mean, obviously something's better than nothing, but where you're going to run into is you're not going to have a lot of logging and reporting data. Also as well, you may have potential that when that staff member leaves, the multi-factor is linked to them. So you might not be able to do a proper handover and you have to remove multi-factor, then put it back on. So if you've used a third-party IT company to do all that and set it all up, you're going to have to repay for the services to reconfigure that sometimes because it is sort of linked to the personal staff member. Also as well, I'm really paranoid about how much Android listens to everything you say to serve up ads. And I'm very, very, very sure Google Authenticator and Microsoft Authenticator serve you ads based on the keywords that it hears from that app. But that's my personal opinion. I can't prove that. That's why there's no reference there on that slide to an external link. Sorry. So let's talk Fortinet. As we know, Fortinet's recognized leader for 10th time in a row as a leader and visionary in security and network firewalls. And from the NSS independent audit of security for their products, Fortinet is now sitting at 9 in the 2009 test results. You can see that on the right-hand side, what it's won recommended status for by NSS Labs compared to its competitors, Cisco, Checkpoint, Palo Alto. So let's look at single sign-on. Like I said, I am moving quick, but that's because I just want to get straight to the sales scenarios and the live demonstration as quick as possible. But you got to go through the content. And in this one here, we're talking about FortiAuthenticator. And this is essentially what FortiAuthenticator does. It acts as a gateway into your Active Directory, Kerberos, potential SSO mobility agents, any login portals or widgets, Radius, as well as REST APIs. You'll also see in the next slide that it can work with a cloud-based, it's called SAML, as well. So we'll go through that. But essentially what you're doing with FortiAuthenticator is you're giving people the ability to log into a single system, and then that system will go and talk to legacy systems or new systems that may have different password requirements, but you can basically give what they call the FortiNet FortiAuthenticator single sign-on ability. So you give your staff the ability to remember one password, then you have multi-factor layered with that, and then biometrics as well. So you give them 3 factors to have, then those 3 factors will go off and it will ping all the different systems from there, okay? So what you're doing is giving the illusion of SSO, but you're still having quite a level of multi-factor over it as well. So this is what it looks like from a diagram perspective if you have a FortiNet authentication solution end-to-end. So you use FortiClient for your VPN connection, which supports multi-factor. You use FortiToken, which you can also have in the cloud as well to spit out your numbers. That talks to a FortiAuthenticator. And then a FortiAuthenticator will then allow you passage via a FortiGate, for instance, as your firewall gateway into your network infrastructure. Or it will basically authenticate Active Directory. It can authenticate out via the internet to a cloud system such as Office 365 or Google or Salesforce or Okta. That's called Security Assertion Markup Language, or SAML, or maybe an older server that you've got, like a Citrix or a Novell eDirectory server, you'll be able to ping out to that. So basically, you can log into that single server, it will apply all the necessary security standards and then give you access accordingly. So don't forget, FortiNet solutions for FortiAuthenticator and FortiToken come in a number of different form factors. You've got hardware appliance, you've got virtual machine version, and then you've also got FortiNet hosted, as well as some Azure and AWS out of the box integrations as well. So this is for all the FortiNet suite, the different form factors, and you can talk to Wavelink, to your account manager or the inside sales specialist about what form factor is probably going to be best for your client based on price and also where they want to take their IT as well. So let's have a look at the product matrix for a FortiAuthenticator. As you can see, the different sizes gives you the total number of users. Okay, so it actually comes with your user certificates included in the price. So whilst that's pretty heavy in price, when you look at the cost per user for perpetual licenses, you're very much over a number of years going to be much more cost effective than paying for some of the premium identity access management solutions such as LastPass Premium or Dashlane, or potentially, there's some other solutions out there by Meraki and Cisco as well. Now for FortiToken, you're looking here at actually purchasing the tokens as a standalone because you want to bring multi-factor to a client. Normally starting with FortiToken is the most cost-effective way to do it. So as you can see, it's $95 each for a license, but that's perpetual. Okay, so when you compare that to what we're saying before, about $3 per user per month for something like LastPass, and I think Dashlane's a little bit more than that, maybe like $5 for that. So you're looking at $95 perpetual. And then you've got that in an application, you've got it in a physical token, in a keychain or credit card form factor, or perhaps you just want your certificates sitting on the actual machine, and you can use the FortiToken dongle for that. Okay, they're $106 each. That's AUD pricing. That 1 year subscription, that's a typo, it's perpetual. So as you know, in a normal FortiNet environment, this is our actual environment that we use here at Wavelink. These are all the different things that we've got in our Melbourne office and our Sydney office. So we've got a pure FortiNet end-to-end play, and I'm going to demo that in the next couple of slides. But that's a reminder there about what you can have in terms of fabric. So when I mentioned before, if you're using something like Google Authenticator or you're using something like LastPass, that's going to possibly sit separate to the rest of your network. Whereas if you choose a single security vendor and take as much of the products as possible, this is what it can look like for you. Your switching, your wireless, your cameras, your endpoint, your firewall, your analytics, your cloud manager, your sandbox, as well as your mail protection can all be sitting in a single true pane of glass when you have that many products. So here's a sales scenario for you that you may come up against, which is, I don't see what the problem is. Why should I buy this two-factor stuff when I haven't heard staff complain about password management? Yes, there's a typo in there. So let's look at some of the things that you can potentially talk to as that point that a customer may bring up. And which is my favorite one. People usually buy an alarm after they've been robbed the first time. So as we saw, the Australian Signals Directorate recommends multi-factor authentication because that's a way to prevent password leakage or brute force password attacks by having multi-factor. we mentioned before, staff have probably already formed unsafe habits like having simple passwords like password123 or admin, and storing those passwords in a notepad text on the desktop, which means that if someone was to get through onto the machine, they'd see that document there and then have access to your more sensitive systems like your domain server or perhaps your accounting software. And also productivity could potentially increase if you make access to things like your CRM or your database systems the same password. So a lot of sales reps will complain that, I got to log into something like NetSuite and that asks me for a different password because that has different password requirements, or that has a challenge question on there, which I always forget what the answer to that is, or that makes me change my password every 30 days, whereas my regular Windows Hello password doesn't change. So using FortiAuthenticator, you can have a single face with FortiNet single sign-on, and then people can just use the same password for those systems that have a stricter password requirement as well. And also as well, that multi-factor, as I said before, if you do it properly and you can manage it, then if a staff member leaves, they're not able to log back in because you don't have to worry about, did we change the password for that ex-employee? Because multi-factor will mean that you're going to get the notification to whoever you pass the token to afterwards, and they're not going to be able to log in once they're external to the company. Okay, so it's another sales scenario. We looked at your FortiNet solution, but it seems very expensive when we can use free tools like Google Authenticator or LastPass and update our HR orientation guide. So I've seen this before, maybe some of you here have seen it before, where some businesses, and I commend them, they want that level of, as per their ASD, they want that level of multi-factor, but what they don't want to do is pay for it. So they sort of have an orientation guide that says, when you start, register your @Wavelink email address so that it's a Gmail account. Once you've got that Gmail account, download Google Authenticator. Then you can use your different one-time password generators, using the Google Authenticator. That's how we do it here in this company. So as I said, I commend those people, but there is going to be some drawback for doing it the free way. And we can look at that there, which is that if you want to get a security audit tick, so some tenders or some different government agencies demand that you have to have a certain level of ISO 2700 series security audit checks. And if you're using that sort of jerry-rigged HR orientation guide free tools, it's going to be quite difficult for you to actually stitch everything together. You need to put a staff member in charge of actually sitting and creating the reports and putting it together. Whereas with a FortiNet solution, you can just go run report, click, or you can give guest access to an auditor and they can check that everything's in place. Also as well, free tools can be targeted by hackers due to their popularity. The example I can give is that, you can go to 10 different people and say to them, hey, do you want a free cheeseburger at McDonald's or do you want a free pair at Coles? And that's sort of the way you look at it. Basically, if you have free tools and you say to a hacker there's an exploit, that's like saying there's a free cheeseburger at McDonald's as opposed to a free pair of Coles. They're going to be more interested in the free tool exploit than, say, the FortiNet exploit, because they know the FortiNet one's going to be patched quickly, and that free one is probably installed on, maybe 10 times more devices than the FortiNet solution. And also bolting on security tools, as we said before, means they probably sit in isolation, which means they're not talking to one another. So really good thing about the FortiNet security fabric when you have all the different products is you can set up what they call automation stitching. So if you have someone who's trying to do a multi-factor sign-in and they get rejected 3 times, is it because they're having problems with their token? Is it because they're having problems reading the token? Or is it because a hacker's trying to challenge and brute force your actual login? So you won't know that necessarily from a lot of those tools because it's not going to talk to your other systems. With FortiNet, you could set up an automation stitch to say, if there's 3 failed password sign-ins, I want to be emailed and I want to quarantine that particular device because that's suspicious behavior. And you can do that with a FortiNet suite because they all talk together. So you can basically have FortiNet Authenticator, tell the FortiGate, put that person on a quarantine VLAN. Something sus is going on. I need to get one of my IT people to have a look at that. Also as well, a really good point to say when people want to use that jerry-rigged sort of free solution is that those free tools, their development sometimes can just stop or be slowed down because a lot of time it's built on volunteer work, or there's a particular person who's really driven to really push this product along. And then, they might have some changes in family circumstances, and that means they're going to slow down their development because it's free. It's normally a side thing for them, a side passion for them, and sometimes hobbies can go by the wayside when things change in your life. But also as well, those tools can get bought. LastPass is a great example of that. LogMeIn actually bought them. And what happens, when products get bought by, say, bigger companies like Microsoft or LogMeIn or, say, Cisco, sometimes the product tends to lower in standard, or it changes a bit, or maybe the integration's not as good. So you might start off on a free pass, and then next thing you know, you'll be served through the bill saying all that cool stuff you really liked with that free product. Now there's a paywall gateway there in place. Okay. So multi-factor authentication with FortiClient VPN for user logins. Don't forget, if you're doing VPN login with FortiClient, you can basically turn on, you get 2 free with a FortiGate, and you can purchase, using the pricing before, your tokens to apply to the FortiNet mobile app, and you can put multi-factor authentication on your VPN login. Remember, when people are remoting in via VPN, they're on their home internet, sometimes on their home computers. So you definitely want to talk about putting multi-factor authentication on that VPN. And those who were in my previous session on Tuesday would have seen some of the potential data leaks by using VPN into your network. So using FortiToken free for Microsoft Office 365. Now this is, we mentioned before about, okay, well, if you're using Google Authenticator or Microsoft Authenticator, it's standalone. There's some potential personal data leaks on there. You're not going to have that much control on it from an enterprise perspective. So what you may want to talk to your customers about is, well, you can use FortiToken free, which is an independent one-time password generator, which will work very easily across things like G Suite, Office 365, anything that has a particular QR code for syncing up a one-time password. So what we use here is we use our Office 365 with FortiToken free, okay? And the way you do that is you come into the admin section of Office 365, you go to the particular user, then you turn on Manage Multi-Factor Authentication. What happens when you go, I'm just going to actually move that to live. This is live, by the way. So I press Manage Multi-Factor Authentication here in the admin console of Office 365. And this comes with Office 365 licensing. You don't need to have specialist licensing for it because Microsoft wants you to have multi-factor turned on. And then what you do is you select a particular employee, say Alan Stocker, and then it's just a quick step of pressing Enable. Once you've pressed Enable for that user, when they try to sign in, it'll basically say instantaneously, you need to have additional security verification. So we use the drop-down box, we go on mobile app, and then we basically use the verification code and we press Setup. Then it'll give you this QR code, and then literally on a FortiToken, you press the plus sign. So if we go back to here, you press the plus sign up here in the top right, and what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to scan that QR code, and it'll give you what's here on Office 365, and it'll start giving you a one-time password generator code from there. Okay, that's how simple it is. Once you've got it all in, then you can at least introduce your customer to the FortiNet suite if they're using maybe a FortiGate, and maybe on that FortiGate they're using some of the included tokens for VPN. Well, you might as well add Office 365 on there as well, so you're not having that sort of multiple different one-time password generators, because you can use Oath or Open Authentication with the FortiNet app. Okay, I'm going to jump to questions because we've only got about 5 minutes left. So let's go through the questions that we've got here.
So yeah, we've got one from Alan Baker. How can multi-factor authentication be applied to desktop machines and remote desktop servers? How does this work offline or for a laptop?
Okay, so if you're on a laptop,
Jaden?
Desktop services, you'll often, yep. Go ahead.
No, all good. Over to you.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, so basically, I'll just bring this up. With remote desktop services, you often need to VPN back to that terminal server or that remote desktop. So what you would do is you would layer on FortiClient here, so FortiClient VPN. You would basically put on here when you're trying to connect. So if I try to connect here, Jzulo, and I try to connect to my infrastructure, and then as it connects here, it's going to do a multi-factor authentication request. Okay, what's my token number? Well, I'm going to use the FortiToken app, and I'm going to put in the token number. Technically speaking, I could also use Google Authenticator on there, but you know my opinions on that. So that's how you would do it from a desktop machine. And like I showed you just before, when you want to log into Office 365, if you enable two-factor authentication there, then you can on a desktop machine, when you try to log in from an unknown browser, an unknown IP address, then what you can do is have multi-factor there when you log into Office 365. If you're using something like Outlook, what Office 365 lets you do, if you're using a slightly older version of Outlook and it doesn't come up with the multi-factor request when you try to log into Teams or try to log into Outlook, what you can do is you can generate unique passwords, which are for legacy systems, which means you can turn multi-factor on, but it's a very specific password for Outlook. Okay, and then you can also manage that from the back end of Office 365. But what about RD Gateway for using multi-factor for a local desktop machine? So Alan, just to clarify there, so you're saying that you're in a network, you're at the office, and you want to RDP into a local machine within your office environment. Are you able to just type yes or no, if I've got that correct?
Do you mean to talk?
Yeah, Alan, I've unmuted you, so you're good to go.
No, I'm talking about you turn the computer on. How do we do MFA for initial Windows login is the first step. And then the second question is, how are you doing MFA for an RD gateway server? Okay,
so for logging into Windows and needing multi-factor, that's Windows Hello. So it is possible to turn on Windows Hello for biometrics. Now, to use a software token to log into Windows or perhaps to log into Mac, off the top of my head, I don't know the answer to that. I'm actually going to look into that after this. And Alan, I can email you afterwards as well about whether it's possible to put your software token as part of the Windows Hello suite. That will most likely be one of the features in the domain services where you might be, I know you can turn on biometrics, which is fingerprint scanner or face scanner, and then you can have your static or domain password as a result of that. But then to have the software token, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm going to look that up because that would be good to have multi-factor log onto a local machine. And then for the RD Gateway, you can use the FORTINET Authenticator to basically be the bridge there. So you can use the FORTINET agent, which is on the desktop. So you can choose to log into using the FORTINET SSO mobility agent to log into your RD Gateway. And then to do that, because you're logging into the FORTINET Authenticator, that's essentially acting as the gate for you. Okay, so I know I couldn't answer your first question, but does that answer your second question?
Yep, that'll do.
Okay, wonderful. So Alan, like I said, that's a really good question, but yeah, for multi-factor, you can put Windows Hello on in a Windows 10 environment. And are there any other questions? Because I've got a minute and a half left. So as I've sped through it all, we've managed to get through all the content quite quick. So if there is any other questions, let me know. Or does anyone just want to quickly say, quickly share in the last minute one of their tips that they have for trying to sell multi-factor at all? Because remember, when we go to when we can go back after COVID and we can all mingle again face to face, it'd be really good to sort of swap some security scenarios. Because remember, security as a sales rep, it's not only, okay, I want to hit my number or I want to make sure that my company's got a good sort of market share. When you sell security to companies, you're actually protecting you and your family. And you're like, oh, that sounds a bit extreme. Well, it's actually not. So I worked in the Telstra Business Centre before this job, and we did managed services for businesses in the CBD that were 50 seats and under. And a lot of those businesses, they have your personal details like your name, your address, your date of birth, and perhaps what your current spend is. And they're not really overly protected because they find security a bit scary. They don't have reps to step them through it. And they find that every time they come to security, it's going to cost them an arm and a leg. So they're actually low-hanging fruit for hackers. And a lot of your personal data can be exposed if those smaller businesses aren't more security conscious. So really, sales reps who are out there selling FORTINET solutions are the front line for protecting all of us against that low-hanging fruit. Because whilst the big banks and everything have all this stuff in place, hackers have realized, well, they can just go to someone like a tax accountant and they can actually rip a lot of data from that tax accountant because that's just a small business and they don't want to stretch for security. So that's another really good thing to keep in mind when you're out there selling security solutions, please. Just remember that you're actually protecting all of us by arming up small businesses with better practices around cybersecurity. All right, well, it's hit 12 o'clock, so we'll be able to send the slide deck out. I'll probably edit those spelling errors that I had in there and some of the title errors as well before I send it out to you. And then once that gets over to you, by all means, read over it again. If If you want another session with Wavelink in a bit more detail with your sales team, we're here to help. And then anytime you want us to jump in with your customers as a white label and talk a bit more about security, that's what we're here for as well.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Jaden. The recordings for this this session and Tuesday session will be sent tomorrow with all the decks. And like Jaden said, if you did want any further information, please contact either your channel manager or pre-sales lead at Wavelink. Thank you very much for your time, everyone, and we will see you for next week's sessions. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.